Good morning. Welcome to this session. My name is Ian Clarkson, so I'm the Practice Director for Project Management at QA. That means that I look after all things kind of project management related. Has anybody heard of QA? Oh, thank you. So we're going to talk about project sponsorship. First of all, does anybody know who this guy is? Go and shout out. It's a bit of an attempt to kind of make it sound interesting, but it's William Shakespeare. And as I was thinking about kind of this session, I was thinking about this quote. You know, kind of what's in a name, that which we call a rose abound in the name will smell of sweet. Because the premise being, we're going to talk about sponsorship, but I've heard it called lots of different things. An SRO. Has anybody heard the phrase SRO? An executive? What we're going to talk about is kind of like, it's almost like kind of demystify that a little bit. And actually, really, it doesn't really matter. As a general rule, it doesn't really matter. Different industries, different organisations use terms differently, but actually, what's it all about? Does the name really matter? So that's kind of the premise of what we're going to talk about. And I'm going to ask you to do stuff as well. So what you need is a phone or some kind of device with a camera. Because we're going to use Slido. Has anybody used Slido before? Brilliant. I'll say we're going to use it. We're going to try it. It worked about 10 minutes ago. So I'm going to ask you to use. You've either got data or your internet connected, but I'm going to ask you to kind of create a word cloud for me. So when we get to the point, I'm going to put a QR code up. You can either scan the QR code, or if that doesn't work, I'll give you the link and the code to put in and some instructions to do it. So fingers crossed that will work. So, but before we get into talking about a sponsor, and we're going to finish a little bit with kind of, I work with quite a lot of organisations around sponsorship or SRO-ship or executive, whatever you want to call it, what's in a name. And I've tried to distill that down into some kind of key attributes of what I think a sponsor needs to be right at the very end, which you're then going to vote on to think what you think is the most important one to you. So, but before we get into all that, let's do a bit of theory. Let's have a bit of a recap around what a sponsor actually is. So, this is a project structure. So it's a typical project. We're going to look at a program in a minute, but this is a typical project structure in the middle. So we've got the project board, also known as the steering group, steering committee, what's in the name. We've got your teams. We've got the project manager. And what does the project manager do? Not a trick question. They manage the project. That's what the project manager does. And then you've got the sponsor, who's on the project board, okay, as a key role. First of all, does that kind of diagram look familiar to you? Just nod or shake your head. Oh, good. Oh, good. You're in the right place. Okay, so we're okay with that with a project. Let's talk about a program, and we'll do it this way. So we've got a program board. Okay? And we'll call it a program sponsor for want of a better description. And we'll have a program manager on that program board. And then we've got the project board from before, and we may have a sponsor on that project board. So the sponsor role can also be on a program, could fit within the governance structure a bit like that. That's one way you could do it. Another way you could do it is that actually the program manager doubles up as that sponsor. I know from my own experience of running programs, I used to mostly kind of sit in that right-hand structure. So when we're talking about a sponsor or an SRO or whatever we want to call it, we could be on a project on our own, or we could be part of a wider thing called a program. So quick show of hands. How many of you are working on a program at the minute? So you will have, won't you, a governance structure in that program, won't you? Yeah? There's a lot of awkward faces that I can see right now. Do we? Oh. Right. I should have asked you all to stand up and done it that way, shouldn't you? And then kind of let everyone then sit down. Right. Show of hands. How many of you in your governance structure are operating on that left-hand structure on a program? Oh. Right hand? Interesting. And I guess the third option is neither of the two. Oh, interesting. I guess the point I'm making is, whatever the role of the sponsor is, or the SRO, or whatever you want to call it, there are some things that are just the same. There will be differences in organisation and differences in kind of like how the project and program are run, but there are actually some things that are fundamentally the same, and that's kind of where the focus of this is going to be, really. Okay. So, projects and programs. Right, phones at the ready, or other devices. Right, scan the QR code, or if you can't do that for whatever reason, your camera's broke, go to slido.com and enter the code, whatever that is, 7904989. Is that working for everybody, by the way? Right, when you go on to that, and I'll put it back in a minute, you will see a question that says, what does a sponsor do? Yeah, can everyone see that? Just write words in. It's not a trick question, I promise you. Just put that, what does a sponsor do? In your experience, not what they should do, we'll come and cover that later, but based on your experience, what does, oh, Christ, straight in. And then we'll see this word cloud appear. The bigger the, if you've never used Slido before, the bigger the word, it means more people are saying the same thing. So what we're seeing is approve, champion, make decisions. Who wrote that? Good job it's anonymous, isn't it? What does the sponsor do? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Keep going, I'll give you a few more seconds. You can have multiple goes, by the way. If you want, you're allowed to have kind of put it in multiple. Ownership, support, decisions. Accountability, I like that. Makes important, block. Yeah, fair enough. What else have we got? Engage with the stakeholders, support and oversee the project decisions. I'll take a snip of this, actually. The slides will be available afterwards. If you do want a snip of this, I'll put my contact deal. Come and see at stand 50. We can kind of email it. I'll email it across to you afterwards. Just get in contact. Set the scope. Set the vision. Good stuff. Holds the money, secures the funding. So the big things coming out really are that they, I guess, champion the project, champion the program, we'll come back to that. Provides leadership. I was getting a bit worried that hadn't come up at some point, but thankfully it's come up now. Provides leadership. What else have we got? Decision maker, ownership, advocate, accountability. Thank you. To those people who wrote benefits, that was the kind of, we'll come and look about that in a minute. Lots of kind of things that we expect the sponsor to do. And actually, thinking about what we, kind of the two diagrams that we looked at before, project versus program, when I said there's stuff that's kind of general to both, for me, that list is the same, whether it be a sponsor on a project or a sponsor on a program, for that matter, really. So what does a sponsor do? I like to sum it up in one sentence. And every time I work with sponsors, it could be kind of chief executives or executive team, I ask them a question, which is, as a sponsor, you're accountable. And we have that on the thing. I'll say, what are you accountable for? And there is a right answer to this. So you might have to shout this out actually, what is a sponsor accountable for? The comms, yeah, any more? The outcome? Success? Bingo. If I could sum up a sponsor's role in one sentence, a sponsor is accountable for the benefits realization. Now, normally when I say that to sponsors, there's just like an awkward silence goes around the room. You know, you might hear a solitary bell going off in the background as that drops in, but that is what a sponsor is accountable for, the benefits realization. Why do we do projects? Not a trick question. Why do we do projects? Shout out. To get benefits. That's the reason we do it. We don't do projects because we want to build an IT system, do we? Or we want to create something. We do it. That's the means to the end. A project is the means and the benefits are the end. So if we say in our business case that we are going to spend, I'm going to make some numbers up, £3 million and get £38 million return in the first 3 weeks, and we've all had business cases that say that, haven't we? Or as I like to call them, lying, but we'll move on. Then the sponsor is held accountable for the £38 million that you're going to make in the first 3 weeks. It really is as simple as that. And off the back of that, you can then start to think about some of the things that they're required to do. Then we can start to think about how they need to remove barriers, how they need to champion. And I like the word champion, but at the right time. We don't want them to be a champion all the time, at the right time in particular. Because have you ever had a sponsor that's appointed themselves? They're bound to be a champion for their own project then, even if it's not viable, even if it doesn't actually make any sense. So, accountable for the benefits realization. Right, let's have a nod or a shake of the head. Think about your own sponsors. Maybe you're a sponsor yourself. I don't know. Would you say that you, if you're a sponsor or you're a sponsor that you're on your project, are held accountable for the benefits realization? Or there's a few nods at the back. There are a few nods at the back. A few shakes of the head. Because if anyone ever goes on a project management course, it'd be Prince or APM or whatever it may be, that's what you'll get taught. That the sponsor is held accountable for the benefits realization. So there was an expectation set already around what the sponsor does. And we need to make sure that that kind of marries up a little bit in terms of what the sponsor actually does. So a sponsor is accountable for the benefits realization. Any thoughts or feelings about that statement? That's quite an evocative statement, really, I think. But are there anyone disagree with that? Anyone vehemently disagree with that? Or anyone vehemently agree with it? Show of hands, who agrees with that statement? I'm going to say show of hands who doesn't agree with that, but I'm not sure. So that's interesting. So that, for me, is a kind of a key takeaway, really. When you go back to your organisations and you think around, you're engaging with the sponsor, are they held accountable for benefits realisation? And I guess a natural question could be, well, what do I do if they're not? Maybe we'll talk about that a bit later. So, key functions of a sponsor. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. Okay, it's as much as I can fit on the slide, to be honest with you. Owns the vision. I think we had the vision that came up in the slide earlier. Owns the vision. Kind of what we want to achieve. The kind of the artist's impression of the desired future state, for want of a fantastic term. So this project, this program will deliver this. They own the vision. I would go so far as to say they write the vision. It's that important. They own the business case. They might not write it, but they're held accountable for making sure that that business case stacks up, basically. So if you say you're going to invest £3 million, that's a realistic cost. If you say it's going to we're going to get £38 million back after the first 3 weeks on the benefits realisation. They're held accountable for that. Secures the budget, realistic or otherwise. I'm sure that a sponsor can secure a budget. Whether it bears any resemblance to the actual needs of the project is another matter. Strategy alignment. It's the fundamental question of why. Why do we do projects? Just because your business case said it made a bit of sense 6 months ago, is that any reason to say that you just keep going? Continued business justification, continued strategy alignment, or the expression that I tend to use is, always keep your eye on the why. That's the role of the sponsor. Keep your eye on the why that we're doing it. Strategy alignment. Clear governance. And by that I mean, if I just kind of go back to this, let's go back to this slide actually. Be clear around what this is. It's the sponsor's role to make sure that everybody knows what the comms are, everyone knows what the roles are, everybody knows who's reporting into who, etc. Clear governance. And I can absolutely guarantee if you get that governance wrong on your project, it will constrain the project. Governance will either make or break your project, I can guarantee it. You know, kind of. I was working with a few years ago, or many years ago, I was working with a bank, and I was with their kind of change board, and their change director said, good governance will liberate the project. And they're absolutely right. If you get the governance right, you get that structure right, then that will make a huge difference to the project. And that is a really, really big role of the project sponsor. Let's just go back to where we were again. And then finally I said make decisions, which I think everybody had. Yeah. Now, your list had a lot more on that, but these are kind of some of the key things, really, that I think kind of the sponsor, or the SRO, or the executive, or whatever you want to call them. Does anybody use any other term other than a sponsor or an SRO in their organisation for this role? Project director, but is it kind of, is the expectation of that similar to what we're talking about here? Yeah. Any other terms? The accountable exec? Oh, you might have to shout from the back. Business lead? But again, is that doing this, it's what's in a name? Yeah. Any other names? Executive sponsor. Is that like a sponsor plus type thing? Is that like a more important sponsor? But is it doing the same thing? Yeah. What's in the name? The key functions, okay? Some key attributes or some key kind of behaviours, if you like, that I see. We had leadership in there. And whilst these are not in any particular order, I did put leadership at the top because it's the, kind of an important one. They need to be available. And by that I mean available, as in not just at stage gate reviews, not just at key decision points in the life cycle to say, do we continue or not? That is the minimum number of places that they should be available. And it links in with the visibility side of things, because has anyone ever faced issues on a project? Do they happen when it's convenient? No. So what do you do if you need the sponsor when it's an issue's hit at an inconvenient time? What do we do? What would we like to do? Speak to the sponsor. Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice? So they have to be available for the ad hoc stuff. I had a sponsor once. It was a few years ago. The sponsor had a BlackBerry. Do you remember? Did anyone have a BlackBerry in the day? Do you remember the little red blinking light? You could never ignore it, could you? So my sponsor had a BlackBerry. Didn't matter where. I learned that the available thing was, don't call him. Don't email him. I'll text him. Because he couldn't resist that little red blinking light. And I'd get an instant reply, no matter where he was. Aren't you in a board meeting?
Approved. Brilliant. I don't care how I got it, just as long as they were available, and that's what I figured out was the way that I could get access to my sponsor. You need to figure out how to get access to sponsor. I would go so far to say if your sponsor's not available, they're the wrong sponsor. Simple as that. I would put availability above everything else. Absolutely above everything else. So when you think about project lifecycle, start, middle, end, concept definition, startup initiation, whatever we want to call it, the role of the sponsor is at the front end of. We should be involving the sponsor a lot at the beginning of the project. You know, when we go to stage gate reviews, I'm a big fan of the philosophy of no surprises. If there's any issues with a project, we should really kind of make the sponsor aware by then. Okay, many years ago, I was working with a government organisation, and there was a lovely gentleman there called Richard, who sadly passed away now. And he said something: projects fail at the beginning, they don't fail at the end. And a big part of that is your engagement with the sponsor. If they're not available from the project, for those informal ad hoc conversations, what you think about this, you're going to struggle. So, they need to be visible. They need to be an advocate for the project. I don't know how somebody could be a sponsor if they're not bought into the project, if they're not championing it, if they're not kind of if they don't actually believe in it, really. They need to be supportive, it kind of goes without saying. They need to be courageous, which sounds a bit, the last two, they need to be courageous in the sense of saying they need to kind of support and be prepared to take a tough decision, be prepared to stand up to the wider organisation to say, this isn't working, we need to stop the project or the programme, or we need more money, or whatever it may be. They need to have that courage to do it. And then the last one is kind of around the psychological safety, really. I think, for me, they have a responsibility to set up that environment within the project such that the project manager and the project team or whoever else can raise risk and talk freely without fear of retribution, without fear of, and have that psychological safety. My experience is not every sponsor can do that. Every sponsor actually has the skills to do that. So some of these are quite obvious. The last couple, I think, certainly for me, that's kind of something relatively new that I've kind of switched on to over the past kind of 6 months or so.
Anything missing on that list, would you say? Those kind of behaviours that you're kind of looking for? Because we're going to kind of distill it down into my kind of list, if you like. Anything jumping out that goes, well, you've forgotten this, Ian? Anything on there that you think, well, that's interesting, I wouldn't have thought of that? Or anything you just go, no. Just no. That's no. Sorry? Ownership of the project, of the... I would put it under the... kind of under the owns the business case, benefits realisation, the kind of the... kind of almost like through it all, I would say. They have to be kind of that business owner. They have to be that person who can secure the budget and takes control and makes the decision. So kind of throughout that. Sorry? Knowledgeable. About what? Of the business. Now that's the really interesting one. Knowledgeable about the business. Do you expect a sponsor to be knowledgeable about project management? A little bit, maybe, but knowledgeable about the business. I think you're absolutely right. That kind of holistic, what's going on across the wider business, to be able to make decisions, especially in a program or in a portfolio, where your decisions as the sponsor may affect another part of the portfolio. Yeah.
So thinking about your organisations, I'm trying to think of the question. Have you ever recruited for a sponsor? Or they always kind of come up from within? Why is that? So nobody's saying they've ever recruited for a sponsor. Why not? Oh yeah, sorry, we'll bring you the one. Sorry. Right, so you recruited it in, so you were taking the view, kind of knowledge maybe of the industry of the business rather than kind of project, or was it a project management college?
No, it was, we were setting up a new customer-facing offer, and nobody in the business had experience of that, so we recruited that knowledge
Right, okay.
to then sponsor. But I'd say that's the exception, bringing somebody in to a sponsor.
Oh really? So kind of, see, I find that quite, I find it interesting that organisations won't recruit for sponsors. Because looking at all of this stuff, none of that says you need project management domain knowledge. I think you can get that, knowledge of the industry, but some of this is all kind of very generic. So, these are my 10 A's of a project sponsor. So this is kind of my distilling down, if you like, into some of the attributes and some of the kind of the functions and the features. And we're going to get Slido out again in a minute. Let me just kind of get that going. I'll go on to that one. So, of all that stuff and kind of working with organisations, by the way, 10 isn't a deliberate number, it just happens to come out that way, I promise you. Honest. And they always happen to be ends, but the 10 A's of a project sponsor, they've got to be an advocate, they've absolutely got to be an advocate for the project. They've got to have the authority. That kind of goes without saying. How can you expect somebody to make a decision on a project if they're not given the authority? It might be within limits, but they've got to be given the authority and, dare I say, autonomy to do that as well. It needs to be available ad hoc, and that's that kind of, if an issue happens, how do we make available the blinking lights on a BlackBerry? They absolutely need to be accountable for the benefits realisation, and therefore everything that kind of goes up to that point in terms of cost, time, resources. We've got to be active, which is the A word I was thinking about, the visible. So they've got to play an active, it's not a passive role. It's not just, there's a month, every month we'll just come and talk to the sponsor with a bit of an update. A sponsor update is not the first time that they've seen what's going on. It's not just a gate review. They've got to be active throughout. They need to be an advisor to the project manager in particular. Approachable. It's got to be a bit of a people person, I think. It's that kind of one of those behaviours, one of those kind of traits really. They have got to be able to delegate to the project manager. I've met many sponsors who maybe kind of come up to the project management way, and actually they can't let go of that in the role of a sponsor, and they default to what they know, and therefore they get into the weeds of kind of like, Have you ever heard a sponsor say, could you show me your statistical analysis for earned value management? No. Well, I haven't. I think your confidence intervals of your estimating is not quite right. That's not what they're there for. Delegate that stuff, the running of the project, to the project management team. They need to be an ambassador for the project as well. Even if they, and this is something I came across recently, even if they're not particularly bought into it, they still need to be that ambassador. They still need to front it up. And they need to be authentic. Yeah, they need to kind of personally authentic, professionally authentic as well. So then my 10A's. Right. Have we got the phones back? Slido. What I'd like you to... Oh, hello. some of you have already done it. There you go. Thank you. It's only a bit on screens. Pick your A. Which is the most important A of the sponsor for you? Well, you know what mine is. I said mine was available. So don't be kind of influenced by that. But which is the most important A of the sponsor for you? I find it fascinating watching the pond go. I think it's cryptic, isn't it? Keep going. He's written down the logo if you want. I've got one, but I'll let you have a logo actually in a sense. You might not, I don't think I did actually, so. Just give another few minutes. Just accountable. Interesting. I was half expecting that to come up top if I'm being honest with you. Accountable. Interesting. And having just said that, somebody just popped up. Maybe I'll just keep quiet. I'll be another couple of minutes. And I'm looking for any more votes? Anyone? Last call for votes. So, available and accountable on time. Followed by advocacy, active ambassador. There you go, somebody just stops. Somebody done that deliberately, just think. I'll go back to where it was before. Kind of availability and accountable. Now, so that's what. So we're going to go with that's what we're going to say, yeah? Quick show of hands. Do your sponsors tick those two boxes right now? If you do, put your hand up. I think you're in a nice position if you do. Hands up if you don't. Maybe you tick one of them. No, let's do that then. How many of them tick one of those? Alright then. How many of them tick none of those? Interesting. I guess the question is then, what can we do about it? And I think we know there's lots of research out there about the importance of the role of the project sponsor. And actually, I don't think necessarily need research to know about the influence the project sponsor can have on that, so on the success. So if we've got somebody who isn't doing that, I think we need to cancel our result, or maybe that's the kind of conversation. If you're part of the programme, maybe that's a conversation at the programme level. If you're not part of the programme, if you're not part of a programme, is there somebody in the portfolio? Is there somebody in the wider head of change, head of project line, head of profession, something like that you can go talk to if you genuinely think that the sponsor is the wrong person? And sponsors get appointed by all manner of different roles. So they're not necessarily that the accountable person. Quick question for you. Have you got enough sponsors in the organisation? So think about what's coming down the line. Think about what's coming down the pipeline in your organisation. Is a sponsor only relevant to a massive project? Do you need a sponsor on a 10 grand, 3-week project that's all internal? Yeah. Do you need a member of your Execo to be the sponsor on that 10 grand small project? Maybe not. He's going to need a sponsor. So where's that talent coming from? Where are you getting that next story, that next kind of generation of sponsors to come through? If you're not start thinking about it. Because one thing we do know, it's busy in project management. Anyone find it busy in project management? Yeah. So we know that change is omnipresent. We know that There's going to be more change. So we know there's going to be need for more responses. So it's up to you, really, to kind of start thinking about that, isn't it? Where you going to get, if you haven't got enough now, how are you going to develop that talent pipeline? Might be somebody in this room. Go ask the question. Don't ask the question. Demand to know the answer. You know, kind of how many responses have we got? Because the other common thing I see is that time is the biggest excuse for somebody not to do responsive. I haven't got time to do it, I'm responding to too many other things. You just don't have enough people to do the role. So think about the here and the now, and think about the future, the next few years, where you get that talent compound. You do need them. You're absolutely going to need more sponsors. And do look internally, and look externally. I do work with some organisations who do recruit externally sponsors. But crucially, think about who you're looking for. And not as in the person's name, but what are those attributes, those characteristics that you're looking for in a sponsor, who may be different to what you think they want. So that is the end of this bit. I will take a snip of the Slido stuff, so if you do either drop me a note or come see me at stand 50,
So that's it. So brilliant. Thank you. Slides will be available with all this stuff on, and kind of the happy to share the Slido outputs. I saw some people taking photographs anyway, so if you got them, brilliant. But thank you very much indeed. Cool.